Ladies and gentlemen, if I can get your attention, please. We're about 4 minutes away. Thank you all for coming out. I have a few announcements. First, I want you to take notice of all the exits. We have one over here at the green door to your left. We have one straight ahead next to the looker, and we have one over to the right in the Evelyn. Let me catch my breath real quick. Tonight, we have a very full house. Please be courteous of those around you. Please turn off all cell phones, pagers, beepers, blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, anything that concerns. We have requested, and this Adichie has requested, no photos tonight during the book signing. That means no going around and having your photo taken. You can take a picture while she's signing your book. You cannot go around and let your photo taken. Okay? And this is very strictly enforced. Please do not ask, and do not hold around the table. Also tonight, we have exactly 19 books left to sell. That's it. So, after the talk, you don't have a rush. So anyway, relax. She'll be up. She wants to go home. Okay? And like the final word, don't forget, if you leave the room, take your ticket with you. Because we can't let you know about your ticket. And that's also your assignment ticket. We will be calling you up on your ticket. A, B, C, etc. Thank you.
Do you have your ticket?
Check 1, 2. How about now the room is focused? Still hear me? Still. How about back there? Can you hear me? You sure? Yeah, okay. How about over here? Can you hear me over here? No problems? Okay, last chance. Serious. Okay. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I guess you can hear me. Welcome to the Miller branch of Howard County Library System. I'm Lisa Banker, the Events and Seminars Manager here Library, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you this evening to our local author event with Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I would like to thank our wonderful event partner, our event and book sale partner, Howard County Poetry and Literature Society, also known as Coco Calypso. I always love saying that. Coco Calypso is a community-based, not-for-profit arts organization, and they can be found online at cococalypso.org. I'd also like to thank Friends of Howard County Library for their strong support of all of our classes and events, including notable author events such as this one. You'll find Friends membership coupons over there by the water at the entrance. So if you'd like to join the Friends, please feel free to pick up a coupon and contribute to our mission of high-quality public education for all ages. After the author presentation, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions, purchase books, and get them signed. We'll be calling you up to the book signing table that's right here in this room by the group letter on the back of your ticket. So until your group is called, feel free to browse in the library or check out books or just relax in your seat. If you haven't already done so, if you would please take a moment to silence your cell phones, that would be terrific. Thank you. It's now my great honor to introduce Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She's an acclaimed New York Times bestselling author, and we are delighted to be included on her paperback tour for Americana. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie published her first novel, Purple Hibiscus, in 2003 at the age of 26. It won the Commonwealth Writers' Prize and the Hurston Wright Legacy Award. She followed Purple Hibiscus with Half of a Yellow Sun, her epic novel set against the backdrop of the Nigeria-Biafra War in the late 1960s. Half of a Yellow Sun won the Orange Prize for Fiction and has been recently made into a film starring Chiwetel Ejiofor, who received an Oscar nomination for his outstanding performance in 12 Years a Slave. The film debuts next month in the UK and Nigeria and is set for release this summer in the United States. Chimamanda's short story collection, The Thing Around Your Neck, was published in 2009, and her latest novel, Americana, just came out last year. And as many of you no doubt have already discovered, Americana is a captivating and powerful story that spans 3 continents and explores race, identity, immigration, and love. Reading it is an addictive pleasure, and it may just change the way you perceive the world. Less than 2 weeks ago, Americana won the prestigious 2013 NBCC Award for Fiction. That's the National Book Critics Circle Award. It has also won the Chicago Tribune 2013 Hartman Prize and was one of the New York Times 10 Best Books of the Year. Also, some more exciting news. Rumor has it that Americana may be set for a big screen adaptation. Oscar-winning actress Lupita Nyong'o might be making an announcement sometime soon. Chimamanda has given several TED Talks that have received millions of views throughout the globe. Beyoncé, in her hit song Flawless, featured an audio sample from the author's 2013 TEDx talk titled We Should All Be Feminists. And in 2009, Chimamanda gave a TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Story. In this inspiring lecture, she challenges us to recognize our default perceptions, which I often think of as our autopilot. Perceptions that all too often reduce people and their multifaceted realities to a single false dimension, hence the danger of a single story. Well, we all brave the weather tonight because of the wisdom and the power of Chimamanda's many stories. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie was born and raised in Nigeria and came to the United States to attend college. She afterwards completed a master's degree in creative writing at Johns Hopkins University in 2003, where she studied with Alice McDermott. In 2008, she received a Master of Arts in African Studies from Yale University. And she's also a recipient of a 2008 MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, also known as the Genius Grant. Chimamanda divides her time between Nigeria and Columbia, Maryland. So please join me now in welcoming Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Hello. Lisa, thank you for that lovely introduction. It's so lovely to be here to see all of you. Thank you for coming. I want to start by apologizing for being a little low energy. I just haven't been feeling very well the past few days, but I didn't want to cancel this event because it's kind of special. It's because it's local for me. This is very close to my work home, so I wanted to come because there's just something special about the local events. And I want to thank you all for coming. It means so much to see this wonderful people. I am going to read from Americana, just to read briefly from the beginning. And then I would be very happy to take questions, to listen to comments, to talk about the weather, talk about hair. Just to say we don't have to talk about very serious things. I'm very happy to talk about weather. But I'll read from the beginning of Americana. Princeton in the summer smelled of nothing. And although I never liked the tranquil blueness of the many trees, the clean streets and stately homes, the delicately overpriced shops, and the quiet, abiding air of earned peace. It was this, the lack of the smell, that most appealed to her. Perhaps because the other American cities she knew well all smelled distinctly. Philadelphia had the musty scent of history. New Haven smelled of neglect. Baltimore smelled of wine, and Brooklyn of sun-warmed garbage. But Princeton had no smell. She liked taking deep breaths here. She liked watching the locals who drove with unwanted courtesy and parked their latest model cars outside the organic grocery store on Nassau Street, or outside the sushi restaurants, or outside the ice cream shop that had 50 different flavors, including red pepper, or outside the post office where a effusive staff crowded out to greet them at the entrance. She liked the campus, green with knowledge, the Gothic buildings with their vine-laced walls, and the way everything transformed in the half-light of night into a ghostly sleep. She liked most of all that in this place of affluent ease, she could pretend to be someone else, someone specially admitted into a college American club, someone adorned with simplicity. But she did not like that she had to go to Trenton to braid her hair. It was unreasonable to expect a braiding ceremony in Princeton. The few black locals she had seen were so light-skinned and black-haired, she couldn't imagine them. And yet, as she waited at Princeton Junction Station for the train on an afternoon at Place with her, she wondered why there was no place where she could braid her hair. The chocolate bar in her handbag melted. A few other people were waiting on the platform, all of them white and blue, in short, flimsy clothes. The man standing closest to her was eating an ice cream cone. She always found it a little irresponsible, the eating of ice cream cones like grown-up American men. Especially the eating of ice cream cones like grown-up American men in public. He turned to her and said, "About time," when the train finally picked in, with that familiarity that strangers adopt with each other after sharing in the disappointment of a public service. She smiled at him. The graying hair on the back of his head was swept forward, a comical arrangement to disguise his bald spot. He had to be an academic, but not in the humanities that he would be more self-conscious. In a firm science like chemistry, before she would have said, I know, that peculiar American expression that professed agreement rather than knowledge. And then she would have started a conversation with him to see if he would say something she could use in her blog. People would flatter yes, about themselves. If they asked what she did, she would say vaguely, I write a lifestyle blog. Because saying I write an anonymous blog called Restine, or various observations about American blacks, those formerly known as Negroes, by a non-American black, would make them uncomfortable. She had said it though a few times, once to a dreadlocked white man who sat next to her on the train, his hair like old twine ropes that ended in a blonde fuzz, his tattered shirt worn with enough piety to convince her that he was a social worry, and mindly the good guess for her. Race is totally overhyped these days. Black people need to get over themselves. It's all about class now. Perhaps you have much. She told her equally. And she used it as the opening sentence of a blog post titled, Not All Dreadlocked White American Guys Are Down. Then there was the man from Ohio who was squeezed next to her on a flight, a middle manager, she was sure, from his boxy suit and his contrast color. He wanted to know what she meant by lifestyle blog, and she told him, expecting him to become reserved, or to end the conversation by saying something defensively bland like, the only race that matters is the human race. But he said, ever write about adoption? Nobody wants black babies in this country, and I don't mean biracial, I mean black. Even the black families don't want them. He told her that he and his wife had adopted a black child, and their neighbors looked at them as though they had chosen to become martyrs for a dubious cause. Her blog post about him, titled, Badly Dressed White Middle Managers from Ohio Are Not Always What You Think, had received the highest number of comments for that month. She still wondered if he had read it. She hoped so. Often she would sit in cafes or airports or train stations, watching strangers, imagining their lives, and wondering which of them were likely to have read her blog. Now her ex-blog. She had written the final post only days ago, trailed by 274 comments so far. All those readers growing month by month, linking and cross-posting, knowing so much more than she did. They had always frightened and exhilarated her. I think I'll stop here. Thank you for listening. So I'm very happy to take questions if anyone has them.
If you'll wait for me to continue with a microphone here.
I'm still trying to formulate what I was going to say, but I guess my question would be, there's something very simplistic about a single story that it's very easy to, it's easy to see that are very simple, and have a very single story. It's very simplistic. And so, all about that
I think I'm not sure I understand that. People who don't have a wide horizon.
I think that sorry, there are a number of people who don't have that same opportunity that they do, that they themselves come from a single story. And so it's difficult for them to look outside their own little box and see something bigger.
And I'm not sure that I have a question or a statement. It's how do we go about changing them for the average person? How do we get them outside of that single story and open it up?
Well, as somebody who's also guilty of the single story, I'm not sure that I have the answer to that. But I do find myself wondering about the idea of people coming from a single story. I think I believe that everybody has a complex story. The question is that sometimes when you're looking at somebody's life from the outside, it can seem simple, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. And I think in some ways, maybe the reason I think that is the incredible ability of human beings to change and adapt and learn and grow. And so for people who, I kind of like, it's interesting the idea of everybody who lives in Colombia being well-read. I don't know if that's true. I love Colombia, let's just say. I mean, but but I suppose the point being, how do we change that? We change that by making sure that, and this is generalizing, but by making sure that people have opportunities. There are schools that I have visited in inner city Baltimore, or even in DC, that shocked me. And they shocked me not because I thought the kids came from single stories that obviously didn't, they were very interesting, but because I couldn't understand how, in a country like America that really has resources, our children would be educated in places of that sort, and how then we expect them to go off and be individuals who are able to make the world better and to conquer the world and all of that. I just think that if you haven't given people the best opportunity, it's difficult to expect very much from them. So there are times that I've visited those schools and I just sit there thinking, surely we can do better.
I've read two of your books, and Purple Hibiscus and Americana, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but just for me, they both helped me feel a little bit more comfortable in my skin. I'm from the Caribbean, and we have to talk about the hair since we're here for Americana. But like I said, I felt a little bit more comfortable, and you addressed a lot of the issues. Whether being a person of color from the Caribbean or from Africa, I feel like our challenges are similar. Do you feel a calling to help people of color go back to their roots and feel more comfortable with the hair and the skin? Is that a battle? Because that's my battle. I want to know if it's yours also.
Well, I just want to say thank you. What you said is, in some ways, and I don't want to sound mockish or anything, but hearing that sort of thing, that it made you feel more comfortable in your skin, it makes me think that's why I write. The idea that, but the thing is that when I'm actually writing that, I don't know that that's going to happen. When I'm writing those novels, I'm writing, I'm exploring characters, I'm writing a story I want to tell, I'm sometimes transported, and of course the hope is that somebody else will connect, but you never know, and so it's very lovely to hear that. But I don't think I can say quite honestly that I have, I don't think of myself as having this driving mission to save the black folk of the world. And quite frankly, I also don't think that black folk need saving. Right? I think that, but I can say that, and because fiction for me at least comes from a very personal place, and I wouldn't write about what I didn't care about. And so I do very much care about black hair. I do. I just happen to, and Americana became my way of writing about what I care about. I think it's the same way that, and the reason that I found it interesting is that in some ways it's new for many people. It's not something that's really been explored a lot in contemporary fiction. And sometimes people will say to me, but why hair? And it's interesting because it seems to me that somehow it's something we should question the validity of hair as a subject, but we don't have to question the validity of such things as baseball. I mean, you can write a whole novel about baseball, and everybody can intellectualize it. But why can't we do that with hair? Which, by the way, isn't just hair. I mean, I think it would be dishonest to say that hair, particularly for women, and particularly for black women, is just hair, because it's not. And when hair is laid, I mean, I like to say, half jokingly, but I believe it, that if Michelle Obama had had natural hair, looking the way it looks when it grows from her head, Barack Obama would not have become president of the US. I mean, I think that anybody who's an acute and honest observer of America will admit that, because the hair of black women often is so loaded with meaning, often ridiculous meaning, so that when you decide that you don't want to put chemicals in your hair and you want to wear your hair in dreadlocks, for example, you might not get that job because the person who's in a position of power is thinking that it means something. So maybe she's a secret black panther, that kind of thing. I mean, I have a friend, I know, this is true though, I know a young woman, and in some ways I know a young woman who's Nigerian American, who had graduated from Harvard, had done very well, and got a job in New York in a consulting firm. And when she was telling me about the job, she was very excited about it. And then she said, "Oh, I'm going to cut my hair a week before I start." She had very long dreadlocks. And she said it very matter-of-factly. And I said to her, "Well, why?" And she said, "Oh, because my boss says that the client won't be comfortable with my hair." And for me, the sadness of it was that she was very matter-of-fact and accepting, because she lives in a world that has told her over and over that her hair, the way it grows from her head, is a problem. And so it's not a question of choice for her. It's a question of, if you want this job, cut the hair because the clients will be uncomfortable. And for me, there's a sadness about it. And I just keep thinking, I want a world where that doesn't have to happen. I want a world where women can wear their hair however they want and not have it mean something to somebody who doesn't know anything about black hair. And so it's really, I just love hearing that. But and also that. And I think there are many similarities to the experiences of immigrants from the Caribbean and from Africa, and also Americans who have been here for hundreds of years but are black. I think that, well, I could start to give a little mini lecture about race, but I won't. So I want to make sure I've answered the question. So the answer to the question is, do I feel, I don't have that sense of mission, but I do have a strong sense of the things I care about. And in writing about them as honestly as I can, it's wonderful for me when other people connect to it, as you have. So thank you.
Over here.
To surprise you, this is my childhood friend. We actually grew up on 6th Street.
It's so funny, when she stood up to ask the question, I thought to myself, she's so nicely dressed, she has to be Nigerian. And I had no idea that, yes, in Central Banifo Street. Yes, we were number 13.
Good to see you, and congratulations.
Thank
I'm so
you.
proud of you
Thank
for
you.
all your success. I've read all your books. Incidentally, it was my husband that told me you were writing some years back, and I didn't even know. And she says, "This person is such a good author, so you must know." I'm like, "What?" Oh my God, I was so thrilled. But read through your books, I'm very impressed, very happy. I took my family to see Happy the Yellow Sun. I think as well. And I really enjoyed it. Such a wonderful. In your characters, I do find them, especially very strong characters, and I like that about them. And but sometimes when I'm reading it, I wonder, do you find is it an intention for you to speak through them, or is this, do you find it difficult to separate yourself or your perspective on opinion about women, feminism, and stuff like that when you're writing? What's the Or is this our intention to use this platform to, tell people about who you are?
Hmm. I'm very tempted to say that yes, all of my fiction is really about me and promoting my feminism, but I don't think that's true. I think, well, it's an interesting question because I'm very happily openly feminist. But also strong women are familiar to me, so I don't have to pull them out from the sky. I'm surrounded by strong women. I grew up amongst some strong women, as did you, and. And I think that in my fiction, I don't think that all my female characters are strong. I think as a fiction writer and as a creative person, I try very hard not to start my fiction with ideology. I think my ideology shapes my fiction, but I don't think I don't think my fiction, and I hope it doesn't necessarily, I don't think my fiction is a tool for my ideology. And I think if it were, then all my female characters would be strong and happy, and all my male characters would be feminist, and and every relationship, both people would be happy because many of the issues wouldn't be there. But that's not the case. I'm writing about the real world, and I have to write about female characters who are not feminist and male characters who are, or the reverse, because the world is complex and it's very difficult to put the world in ideological boxes. So but I think what I know about my fiction is that it's almost impossible for me to write a story in which a woman, at least one female character, isn't present and strong and complex, simply because I am so familiar with that. And also because when I look in the mirror sometimes, that's what I see. And but I've often been asked about my strong female character. I mean, people, not in the way that you asked it, but more that people will say to me, how do you do that? Many of your female characters are strong. And of course, the question itself, I think, says something about gender, because nobody asks men, how do you write strong male characters? Because the assumption is that men are strong, and that if women are strong, it becomes remarkable. But in my world, it's not. The strength of women is really quite normal and familiar. I just wish that our world wouldn't keep thinking that it's so remarkable that women are strong because, and I also wish that the world would give more space for more women to reach their strength. I mean, I think often women are not stronger than the world lets them be. And actually, in not this book, but in Half of the Yellow Sun, I also wanted to write about how that idea of strength and femininity, how sometimes it takes something catastrophic to make it come out. So war suddenly brings out a certain strength in the characters that they did not know they had. Or maybe they knew they had, but had felt that they needed to suppress it. But then war happens, and suddenly they're taking on all of these roles. And a kind of, and I think kind of they find a fullness in themselves that.
Okay, we've moved over to your left now. Over here. Sorry.
I'm Chimamanda. I started reading your books because my son is dating a Nigerian girl, and I'm going to have a Nigerian daughter-in-law, and I wanted to understand the culture a little more. So I have read your Half of the Yellow Moon, the Yellow Sun, the hibiscus, purple hibiscus, and the Americana. I want to understand about her hair because she does have haircuts and she's beautiful. Okay, so you made me understand a little bit of her culture and her people. Her father fought in the Biafra war, so when I read that book, I understood what she did. Your books really made me understand a little more about Nigerian culture, which will surely become part of my movies. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and I love that story, and give them my very best.
Good evening. My name is Chimamanda, and I'm delighted to meet you. As I said, I am a professor, and I teach global health. I'm also Nigerian by marriage, and I have just graduated from share the students as part of my course. Their TED Talk is a required video, a required video that I make them watch to really understand the danger of a single story and our cultural facts. And as I read your books, I'm just always amazed at your writing. Your blend and how you match things with the history is just so amazing to know. And I'm just really excited and delighted to be able to meet you. At the end of your TED Talk, you said they got Nigerian and you had a Nigerian and why did you make it? And I felt that way for everything that I've said. I didn't want it to end. And when it ended, I always felt like, why did she end it? And is it going to be a part 2? Does it have the yellow sun? Because I really wanted to know what happened to her sister.
Well, I can tell you you're not alone. I can't tell you how many angry emails I've received from all over the world, like what happened. And you know, the answer to that question is even I don't know what happened to my sister. I don't. I really don't. And when I was researching the book, I heard so many stories of people who just don't know. And there's something that's so haunting about that idea of just not knowing. And I wanted to try and capture that. And it's interesting because I was just thinking about, you know, the Malaysian thing that's missing. And I was thinking, what must it be like to kind of really never know? And so I don't know. I don't know if there's a part 2. I don't know.
Hi. I've seen you ask several times, and even here tonight, how much Americana and your other work you've drawn from your own personal experience. So I want to ask a similar question, but flip it a little bit. And I'm curious to know if you ever think about how, in the past year, you've become more like your family, traveling the country and talking about race and gender and hair and economics, and how whether you think I'm becoming the character in the book who had this blog where she talked about those issues.
Okay. That's actually very clever. But you're still not going to get me to say that I'm her, because I'm not. But you know, actually, the traveling, I think it's been more than a year. But it's just that with Americana, the subjects are slightly different. So I did so much travel with Africa and Sun. I was at Softspit talking about Nigerian history and that kind of thing. But you know, I mean, Ifemelu is much more interesting than I am. I mean, she really is. She has a much more interesting life. Because I don't really have a life. I mean, but I'm happy about that. I'm just actually, you know, I stay home and I read and write, and you know, that's fine. Also, I shop online. But I watch natural hair videos. But you know, the idea that I can understand how people have asked me, and it's almost I understand why. I mean, the character's life very closely approximates my own life in the sense of just the basic thing. She left Nigeria, she lived in Philadelphia. But that's only because it's easy to write about what you know. And so I've written about the cities in which I lived, because it's very easy. I know the streets. I can write about them with a certain kind of authority. But the details of Ifemelu's life, and sometimes also even the psychological details of her life, are not mine. But at the same time, I think that there's a slice of me in all of my characters. I have a very close friend who said to me that there's a lot more of me in Binze than in Ifemelu. And it made me think, and you know, I think maybe half of Binze is me and half of Ifemelu is me, and then a quarter of Binze's mother, and then 3/4 of so you know, I mean, and as for Ifemelu, sort of the travel, and maybe it's also because it's something that is mildly familiar to me, the idea of being called to speak about certain things and sometimes not knowing what the hell you're talking about, but still having to speak. And so it's easy to draw from that as well in writing Ifemelu. But she's just so much more interesting. I'm quite keen on her. I don't know if that's obvious.
issue that I have, my name is Chimamanda. I have two names really quick. I'll try to be fast. First one is, I was first introduced to you about 8 years ago when my husband was from Nigeria. And his brother was this big shot writer, blogger in New York. This is before Facebook, before Twitter. And we used to go to these blogs, forums, Nigerian this, Nigerian that. And I remember because he just talked about his brother being a writer, I started reading his writing. And there was a time that Troy Chicken wrote something about you very pleasant, going on with this girl. How dare she? She doesn't represent us. Who does she think she is? And I was reading, started works and everything. I just kept saying, what is the big deal? What is the big deal? And, a couple of weeks ago, I had to see your premiere. I've been talking about it with my friends. I didn't even read books. I was so excited about you. I'm like, you represent us. I'm a girl. I grew up here. My parents tried and took me home. I love everything about our country. I remember when it was beautiful and talk about how beautiful it was. Represent us. Keep going. Watch me. And we're champion. Thank you. The second thing is, my parents just celebrated their 40th anniversary yesterday. Right? So me and my husband are wrapping our pen up to give them. I'm going to give them an autographed book of Happily Ever. But the issue that I'm having, and some of my mates are having, why won't our parents talk about it? I feel like I can talk to them about anything. But we won't talk about things. I'm blessed, like I said, my husband, he's been here about 8 years. He went to university of Wisconsin. We can talk about anything. But my mom, my dad, we won't talk about it. One of them, Chimamanda book, that was a country. They won't talk to me about it. My brother's fighting over the book, like serious fight in the kitchen, throwing water and everything because they wanted to read the book at the same time. So, for my mates, for myself, how do we, this generation, we need to know our history. How do we use book or movie, things that are current and hot now to talk about something that maybe our parents that lived through, they went to university, about married, they lived through this, but I can talk about anything except for this.
Do you ask them? But it's also, it's not unusual that people who go through that kind of trauma, often it's the next generation that tells the story. And for me, I still feel so grateful to my father because until I started asking my father questions, he also didn't talk about it. So we kind of knew that Biafra had happened, and we knew that they had lost everything, and that my grandfathers had died. But we didn't really know. And none of my siblings asked. I was sort of the strange child who just became completely fascinated, haunted, in some ways even possessed by just the kind of curiosity about that period. And I started asking questions. And my mother still hasn't talked about many things. Her father was, before the war, this wealthy Igbo man who lived in the Cameroon, so he was still part of Nigeria, and who, at the time had 2 buses for which he used for transport. It was that was sort of a big deal. The war starts, they have to run away from their hometown. He dies in a refugee camp. My mother's never talked about it. She just has never talked to me about it. And it's something I respect. I kind of asked once. She didn't want to talk about it, and I left it alone. It's my father who I think was able to kind of mine his pain for me. But even that I knew was difficult. And I think maybe we should ask more because it's important for us to try and get the stories because that generation is passing away. And we need to, the history is important, the formal history, but I think also just the textured stories of lives. Because that's what I was interested in when I was researching. I wanted to know about food and how did you cook. I remember when my father told me a story about going to a wedding during the war, and I had read all of these history books, and I thought, oh, people have weddings. And he said, yes, they got married in the middle of the war. And so I think the stories of us that we have to find ways to collect. And it takes patience and take what they can give and don't push too hard, that kind of thing. But we have to, I think it's very important. And mostly because you look at what's happening in Nigeria today, we really need to remember what happened so that it doesn't happen again. I mean, it's...
Hi. I just had a question as an Igbo girl myself. I wanted to know if you feel burdened to tell the story of Nigerian people. Sometimes when I read your story, especially in Americana, when you explored the concept of bleaching as an African woman, and how a lot of people I know in Nigeria, like Cairo now is a big thing, bleaching your skin, becoming lighter in order to look a certain way. I know during the Harlem Renaissance, a lot of people like Langston Hughes didn't favor Zora Neale Hurston because she only told a certain, a certain part of African American culture. She explored different calibers of African Americans. So do you ever feel burdened as a Nigerian, writer, especially as a female, to tell a certain type of story, or do you just feel liberated through your writing?
I never feel burdened to tell a certain kind of story. I think my only responsibility is to tell the story I want to tell as truthfully and honestly and in the best way that I can. And the idea of the issues that affect all kinds of communities, right? And also I just wanted to say, Zora Neale Hurston was writing the story that she knew how to write, and she wrote it damn well as well. And so the idea somehow that one has to be everything for everyone is untrue. I think the universality of good literature comes from how specific it is. So when I first read, for example, Faulkner, who writes about a very particular slice of American life, so small town Mississippi, during a very racist period in American life, I connected to those stories. I knew nothing about it, but there was a specificity, the details of it, and I was just completely immersed in Faulkner's novels. And I think that increasingly, I don't know if it's because of technology and I don't know, Facebook and whatnot, I think there's an increasing, it seems to me, an idea that people seem to think that you have to be everything for everyone, and you don't. Now, I don't set out writing my books thinking that everyone is going to like them or even read them. I don't. My thing is I want to write what matters to me, and I hope that people to whom it will matter as well. And the people who have said to me, I get very long emails from very well-meaning Nigerians sometimes, and they tell me you should address the very important matter of the Niger Delta problems in the country. And while politically I'm interested in these things, my creative self isn't drawn to them, so I'm not going to tell the stories. I want to tell a love story, and I will, and there's some people who are not going to like it, but that's fine, because that's what I want to tell. So and I think that if you're interested in writing, that's probably what you should think about as well. Don't feel the burden. You don't have to tell any kind of story but your own.
Good evening. I have a question about Nigerian Americans, American Nigerians. So, I have Nigerian parents, but I was born in America, born and raised in America. So, it's my mother-in-law. I wonder if she's going to run me. So, the question I have for you is, like, you deal a lot with identity. And so, especially if you stay here, and you have kids, you probably are American and Nigerian. How do you handle that dichotomy?
Okay. I'm just going to skip right over the personal part of that question and just say that I'm interested in identity. I think identity it's such a fluid thing. I don't consider myself, meaning the novel Ifemelu kind of facetiously writes about American Africans and African Americans because there's a difference. There's a difference in history and experience and all of that, but there are also commonalities. I don't identify as either because I like to say that I'm not a Nigerian American. I'm a Nigerian who likes America. And for me, there's a difference there because my sensibility is very much Nigerian. And increasingly now, my home is Nigeria. I'm spending a lot more time in Nigeria than I am in the US. But they're not, I don't think that one has to be a single thing. I think it's possible to be many things, that American Africans I think that they are American, but the Americanness, it's shaped in a way that's different from, say, not just African Americans, but maybe third generation Irish Americans. That the fact that you are born in the U.S., but your parents still have that immigrant fervor in their blood, and they're saying to you, you cannot get a B plus, everything has to be an A. It shapes your experience. And your parents are not telling you, oh, just discover yourself. It's okay if you get Fs. There's a difference in there's a difference in experience, and I think it shapes the narrative. I mean, so I think of myself as a Nigerian who likes America. When I'm back home in Nigeria, I don't really think of myself as Nigerian, really, because I'm in Nigeria. So then ethnic identity comes into play, and also gender. I'm very much aware of being female when I'm in Nigeria. It's because a lot of stupid things happen that have to do with being female. And when I'm in the US, I find myself not just feeling Nigerian, but feeling African. I think that because I left Nigeria, there's a sense in which my politics and my worldview has become so Pan-African that I don't think I would care as much about Kenya and Zimbabwe as I do now if I hadn't left Nigeria. There's that way in which identity is strange and shifts, and I have friends who never left Nigeria who don't really care about certain things. So I can get slightly sort of heartbroken about what's happening in other African countries, and my friends in Nigeria just shake their heads and move on. And I think race is the same thing. I think there's a sense in which America makes you aware of race as an identity in a way that's not the case in Nigeria. So also when I'm here, I think of myself as a black person. I don't in Nigeria. I just don't remember that race is a thing.
Hi. I recently read your novel Americana in my post-colonial literature class, and your TED Talk was also one of our required readings. And I have two questions regarding the Americana primarily, because I've read your other works. The first question is, in Americana, you submitted those blog posts as part of the novel, and I wanted to ask you what led you to choose to do that, only because most novels and other literature that use internet and blog posts tend to be kind of formal at using them, and they sound artificial and very stilted, but yours felt very natural.
Quite pleased to hear that. I've never blogged in my life, but I used to be an avid consumer of blogs. So, but why did I choose to do that? For a number of reasons. I wanted my character, and I wanted to as well, to talk about race, which I think is a central sort of force in this country. But I think it's also something about which people keep silent. I think there are layers of silence around the subject of race in America. And so I wanted to write about it in a way that isn't normal in literary fiction. There are ways, I read a lot of contemporary fiction, and there are ways to write about race in America, and I didn't find any of those ways satisfactory. I didn't want to have to write about race and constantly think about that word nuance, which for me often, when the subject is race, is often a way of closing conversation, because people will say to you, oh, but that's not nuanced. And sometimes there are things about race that are not nuanced. And so I wanted to be very direct, and also I hoped to be funny. And it was just no other way that it could have been done. There's something about blogs. Blogs are so immediate. There's an urgency to blogs. And also a willingness to fail. Because if you're writing a newspaper column, you have to be more careful. And then there are the layers of editorial oversight. But in blogs, you can just sip in. And there was a voice I wanted to cultivate that just seemed perfect for blogs. And
Hi, I haven't read any of your books. I kind of stumbled upon knowing you because of Beyonce's song, right? And then my wife and I have been meaning to read the books, but I listened to a few TED Talks and a couple other lectures kind of like this. And I'm curious as to how you feel about your introduction into a lot of people's lives, my own, and then I know a lot of others, who listen to R&B or hip hop, being through Beyonce, and I wonder how it kind of makes me see. It almost makes me see you through a certain lens. If I don't see the other things, and I wonder if you're conscious of that, and what you think about it.
I'm not quite sure what the lens would be, but I think what's important to me is that there are many, many people as well who know me through my writing, who've read my work, and finding out about me through Beyonce, you know. The important thing is that it's that I gave a talk, and I gave that talk not intending at all for it to be used in any song. I gave that talk because I felt that feminism, and still feel very strongly, that there are gender issues that we must talk about. And it's a talk that inspired Beyonce, which is why she used it. And so I mean, for me, it's simply that I hope that what it means is that you're going to start thinking about gender, and that you're going to become feminist.
I can't speak with the historical perspective you spoke to about race, but I spent about 14 days in Ghana, China, in 2010. And the entire time I was in Ghana, I never thought of myself as black. In fact, I forgot that I was black until I got back. It was about 3 days after the American Civil War. But let's cerebral question. Speak to the audience about your experience.
No, well, that's interesting. Now I shall give a little treatise on watermelons. In the novel, part of the experience of taking on this new identity of Black in America, for me at least, was recognizing a number of things. That American society assumes that once you're a person who has skin that shows that you're of African descent, that you get things. But that's not true. There are many things you don't necessarily get if you don't share that history, even if you're Black. And so when I came to the US, I remember having to learn that certain things were supposed to be offensive. And I was in class, and this was very early on in my time in the US, and somebody said something to an African American woman about watermelon. Do you like watermelon? And she said, and then somebody else says, oh, I bet she does. And then somebody else said, oh my God, that is so racist. And I seriously was sitting there, and I was just thinking, watermelon racist. I just didn't understand, and it was one of those things where then the African American, who was a friend of mine, expected me to share in the rage, and I couldn't because because I remember thinking I quite like watermelon. I don't understand why this is a problem, but but of course, and I think part of and later, and again, I think what struck me about that moment was I couldn't ask. Because there's a sense in which you're not supposed to ask. The things that you don't know, you're not supposed to. We're all supposed to assume that we get it. And so recently, for example, when there was all that noise about people leaving nurses in places, my sense, I just wish that maybe the media would actually put it in context, rather than say to everyone, we're outraged, there's a nurse. And I kept thinking, do people even understand why this is an outrage? And so for me, the watermelon incident was really, very funny still for me, but also in some ways the beginning of my learning what it meant to be Black in America. That there is a long history in which things, sometimes objects, sometimes stories, song, movement, all kinds of things, have been used to dehumanize people. And but it's not something that you automatically get. But I suppose this is also true for many other places. I think, for example, if you came to Nigeria and somebody said something about an Igbo person, for example, and said something about money, some evil people might find it offensive. And somebody who is a foreigner might think, maybe what? But that's because there's a context, which is that Igbo people are said to be money grubbing and they will sell their parents for, $5, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's that. I now understand the watermelon story. I understand all of the stories, and I now try very much. I think part of Americana was, again, half joking, but also quite serious, to try and educate. I think there's a sense in which it seems to me that America has willfully forgotten its terrible racial history. There's a kind of, and I suppose because I'm a foreigner, I listen and I watch, and it surprises me that things that are so recent, things that are so recent that happened in this country, and somehow we're all supposed to forget. And somehow history is not supposed to inform the present. And so there are people alive today who had to be led into schools by federal agents, and they're alive. And yet we see that the answer to these problems cannot involve race. And I just find that really remarkable. So, yeah.
Well, my name is India Warren, and I'm from the southeast of Nigeria. And I wanted to thank you so much for this book on the outside. I remember reading it when I was a little younger. And it really sparked my interest in my Nigerian culture. And before I was Nigerian, I'd gone to plenty of weddings, plenty of parties. I'd done the Nigerian dancing in the groups. And I still felt that I was kind of distant from being born in the U.S. And this book really is what kind of triggered my interest in my culture and learning more about it. And also moving after the war. And I have a question, but before I say the question, I want to just recognize my grandmother who's here with me today, who is a survivor of the Vietnam. And I also want to recognize my grandmother on my father's side, who actually wrote down her stories for me and my family and my cousins, so we know, all of us born in the U.S., so we know a little bit more about our history and who we are and where we come from. And, I think it's, someone mentioned before, they were talking about the fact that, they tried to talk to their parents about what they went through. And I really think it is really about asking. I've asked my father about it, I've asked my mother about it. They've been so open. My mother was in Nigeria by herself. And so they've been really open about their story when I asked them. So I want to encourage anyone else who is of Nigerian descent to do the same thing and ask. And then I also just want to ask my question, which is, I want to know a little bit, I'm a writer, love to write, and I want to learn a little bit about, when you're having a hard time writing stuff, what do you do?
I eat a lot of chocolate. It's true. And I increase the amount of my online shopping. And the best sites are the ones that have free returns, so that you can just send those things back. I think one of the things, but I know it's funny, but this is actually true. I do eat a lot of chocolate and shop online and read fashion magazines. But the other thing I think can work is it's difficult to tell yourself that when you're in the middle of that. And it's a sad place to be, and it's also sometimes a frightening place to be, because at least for me, writing is the thing that matters the most to me in my life. And there are times when it's not going well, and I just worry that I'll never write another sentence, and I worry that there's no point to being alive. But I know my mother will be horrified to hear that. But I think reading helps. Reading and trying not to stress too much, just sort of letting yourself stress for an hour in the morning, and then reading. I find that reading the books I love, things I've read before, and I also find that reading poetry. I read, when it's not going well, I just read poetry, and I read poetry very randomly. I bring out my favorite poets and just sort of read. I'll read James Merrill, who I love. I'll read Tanro Chaide, who's a Nigerian poet. I'll just read I just find that there's just something about, and it's, for me, reading poetry is listening to it. I don't sit there and try to decipher it, because I let the words wash over me. And my hope is is that doing that makes your own world stand
out. First, I want to say thank you for your piece in the scoop. I really appreciate someone of your stature and being popular and taking a stance on the issue in Nigeria that a lot of people sort of support, but they're still deciding to be in the truth, and I really appreciate you for that. My question is, how do you think Nigeria can engage other Nigerians, or I guess Nigeria country can engage Nigerians in the diaspora as far as letting them know that they can come back and sort of come be the change they want to see in the country? How do you think they can do a better job?
I think a number of states are doing that. I think, and there's a movement back, people are moving back. I think a number of the state governments that have certain programs. I know that my state government, Anambra, that the new governor is starting this program that's supposed to be a link between people from Anambra who are in the US and about trying to help them come back if they want to. But I also want to say that it's important to be careful about thinking that that having lived abroad, that somehow we have all the answers, because we don't. I was in the US for 4 years before I could afford to go back home. And when I went back home, for a few months I was very smug and arrogant because I felt I've lived in America for 4 years, I know all the answers to all the problems. And it didn't take very long to realize that I didn't know the answers to all the problems. And that local knowledge is actually much more important. What you can do is that you can supplement local knowledge. What you can't, I don't think it's possible to fix Nigeria by bringing in. There are just some things that won't work. And but I also think that Nigerians who've left Nigeria have a role to play. I think that, and I say this because it's very easy to be outside of Nigeria and sit and complain endlessly, and everything is negative and everything is terrible. And we have many, many problems, but there are also things that are going well in Nigeria, the things that are changing for the better. And so I would say, if you want to go, and there's always if you can get a long leave from work, for example, just go and try. Right, just know that you can come back if it doesn't work out.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Ms. Adichie.
Thank you.
Please remain seated. Please remain seated as she takes her place over at the signing table. We're going to call you up in line according to your ticket. And we're going to start with Group A. Okay, we're going to line up over here. Okay, and as the groups roll down, we will